Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Mainstream Indie Music channel. Not only do we talk about indie music on this channel, but from time to time, and yes, it is a little bit of a preference of my own, we talk about pop punk, especially coming from the 2000s. Now, initially, I was going to write about Justin Pierre, and I probably will at some point, who is the lead singer, songwriter of Motion City Soundtrack. But when I was doing research into him, I stumbled across this story, which is, of course, the subject of the video, in researching him. And it's funny because this was a story I was actually interested in writing and talking about a while ago since I started this channel and kind of forgot about, but then the idea was resurrected. To kind of get the idea about this album, if you are a Motion City Soundtrack fan or if you are a pop punk fan, I almost guarantee you this album probably slipped through the cracks for you, even if you're a Motion City fan. It's kind of one that people forgot because we need to take a look and dissect the background before we get to the actual story itself. Now, Motion City had just come off of probably their biggest bout of popularity as a band. Some can argue maybe it came a little later, like during My Dinosaur Life tour. Definitely, to an extent, I could see that. But, I mean, right after the release of their second album, especially with Everything Is All Right, just blowing up on the airwaves, not even just amongst, like, pop punk and rock and so on and so forth. It was getting into the mainstream media. Motion City Soundtrack was starting to get momentum. And a second reason why they could kind of believe in that is because Motion City Soundtrack, if you do not know this, has always been very close with Fall Out Boy, especially with Patrick Stump. In fact, Patrick Stump has subbed in for Justin Pierre during moments of illness multiple times during the course of Motion City's history. They're kind of just seen in my eyes as like the younger cousin, of like Fall Out Boy. Where they took them under their wing a little bit, but honestly, I think Motion City has always kind of stood tall on their own and kind of even prided themselves in kind of just their own work ethic. I definitely do think Fall Out Boy helped them a little bit, but I think Motion City has kind of been okay with going on their own. Now, who you see on screen, right, because you may be a little bit confused. He plays a big part in this as well, in this story. This is Rick Ocasek, and I hope I said his last name right, because I am a huge fan of the Cars. He is one of the leading men of the Cars, which also I need to talk about on this channel as well. But he was slated and helped produce and even helped on some songs on synth during the making of their entire third album. Now, let me kind of backtrack a little bit. Motion City's third album was called Even If It Kills Me. And like I said, they had just seen their siblings, their family, Fall Out Boy, just absolutely start to blow up during this period of time. Fall Out Boy had just released Infinity on High, and they pretty much had broken free from just kind of staying with like the pop punk crowd and had literally just inserted themselves into the mainstream. So Motion City was kind of thinking to themselves, hey, we have an opportunity here to pretty much follow suit, because granted, while they didn't have as many hits as Fall Out Boy had during their first two albums, again, Motion City had developed kind of a underground following, and pretty much if you listened to and liked Fall Out Boy, you probably liked Motion City Soundtrack as well. So they were thinking in their mind's eye, this is our breakout moment. So they swung big, and they went big. They got Rick to go and help produce this album. They got Adam Schlesinger from Fountains of Wayne to also sit in and produce their album. They got a big studio session room and place where they recorded their album, recording studio. Sorry, I kind of lost the word there. In New York City. You know, they really were just swinging for the fences, and the pressure and nonstop touring from even their second album was carrying their momentum into the making of this third album. However, that is pretty much exactly where everything started to fall apart completely. Justin himself had started to fall victim and to drug usage and alcohol abuse. It was affecting him mentally. He had been covering up during this period of time. Of course, you know, I'm not in the band, but we don't know how well he was covering it, but he was attempting to during this period of time. And coupling with that, he was actually, probably for the first time in his professional life, suffering from writer's block. He had no idea what he wanted to write about on this album. On top of that, they were starting to get mixed signals from Rick and from Adam, where Adam was very fast, kind of very proficient, and would have them retake, you know, hundreds of times during the making of their songs. Rick almost seemed aloof and carefree and not critical at all, almost to a fault. That only helped burden, especially Justin with his writer's block, and the rest of the band with their making of music, because in their mind's eye, they almost had no way to measure how well things were exactly going. Because again, in one session, you know, they were pretty much being told, like, this is crap, this is garbage, retake it, reshoot. And then the next day, they would have Rick come in, and it's almost funny because if you hear Justin's quote, he would almost say, we would play like garbage out of tune, and Rick would almost kind of be like, oh yeah, sounds good. It's fantastic, guys. Thank you. So in their minds, they had no idea how well this album was coming along. In fact, it's kind of funny. I believe his name is Chris Shaw, who is Rick's sound mixer, the engineer, who pretty much mixed all the recordings they had, took all of the takes, the best takes of Justin's voice during these recording sessions, and pretty much that is the final finished product of Even If It Kills Me. Now, before we kind of dissect the album itself, what followed after was almost the end of Motion City Soundtrack, because for the first time, for about 2 months, they went on hiatus. Absolutely horrible time for a hiatus, right? Well, unfortunately, it had to happen. Justin was falling apart. So, the album itself, Even If It Kills Me. Like I said, Rick from The Cars helped produce a lot of this album, and you can tell. The album composition itself is almost completely different from the very first two albums, especially from the second one. Because kind of gone were the heavy guitar, almost very punk albums and sound that Motion City was famous for and starting to get their sound for. And reinserted was the Moog heavy synth songs, kind of slower paced during this album. Now, Motion City did not fall into the path that Fall Out Boy took, and definitely took a hit after this album. And again, like I said, I understand the people that kind of say that Mark Hoppus, who helped produce from Blink-182, that helped produce the next album, My Dinosaur Life, was kind of the guy that resurrected Motion City Soundtrack. And again, for true fans, I see where you're coming from. You know, because definitely it's almost like they just took a huge adrenaline shot in the next album and kind of got back on track to Motion City Soundtrack's very fast-paced punk sound. But the beauty of Even If It Kills Me was just amazing. You know, from right off the bat, from Fell in Love Without You, Broken Heart kind of continues it. But even sleeper hits like the self-entitled Even If It Kills Me, Point of Extinction, there are so many amazing, deep songs on this album. Hello Helicopter, you know, I just recommend for you guys to give it a listen if you haven't. And they came out with an acoustic EP, What do you guys think of this album? Let me know in the comments.